All right, mic check, I'm good. So I'm Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and as always, we're out there having lots of fun trying to find the best stories and talent we can find. This week, we are having extra special fun because we are at Fabtech in Chicago. So this is the icebreaker first podcast of the week of many to come. And today we have Olga Eliseeva. Close enough. Here from EWI. Olga, how are you doing?
Great. Fantastic.
And how's your day been?
Lovely, other than the slight drizzle outside.
It was raining pretty hard at 7 this morning. It was coming down pretty good. Is that lightened up out there?
A little bit, yeah.
That's good. I think it's good to get that rain, get rid of that smoke in the air too.
Exactly.
I've been hearing a lot of blaming about us Canadians sending the smoke down to the U.S.
Oh, absolutely. We definitely have blamed you for the past 5 months.
And, Canadians are still blaming Americans for Zenith TVs. So,
Fair enough.
So, Olga, when did you get into Chicago?
I arrived, I guess Saturday. I have a few friends that live in town, so I wanted to see them before actually getting into the real business of this trip.
And what is the real business of the trip?
Well, I'm here to present on some of the exciting work that EWI has been doing, specifically in terms of mathematical mapping of materials properties.
Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what you do at EWI. So I have listed here that you're an applications engineer, which is a broad term.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So, your background, I think you have a BA in materials and you got your PhD in materials. So, this has been your life journey. There's at least 8 years of school there, and that means that you've really dedicated yourself into this specific field of materials engineering, which in itself is very broad. So, as you start to work towards, the work you do at EWI, what do you do specifically? What do you narrow in on, and what's your specialty?
Oh, what's my specialty? Solving problems.
Yeah.
My everyday looks so different. So my posting is in the resistant solid state welding group. Okay. But my background comes from polymers, comes from additive manufacturing, informatics. So the projects that I work on vary from everything: data science, additive manufacturing, welding, resistant sintering, which is a completely new technique that we've been working on for the past about year and a half. So it's a little bit different every single day.
So how did you find yourself down this path in the beginning?
I still ask myself that.
Many engineers start the world of engineering as just like, I'm going to school to be an engineer. And then, during that initial undergrad, you start to break apart and think about what you want to do. What was it about materials engineering that attracted you? And did you think that it would end up in the welding sphere in the end, or did you have kind of a different goal when you started?
So funny enough, I knew I wanted to be a materials engineer since about the 7th grade. So
Really?
Because it was so broad and because there's so many things you can get into, it was always a huge passion of mine. I got really into silly putty. I didn't understand how it worked from like a chemical level.
Yeah, soft and hard.
It didn't make sense to me. I was young and I thought it was a really cool
Isn't
toy.
that Newtonian properties?
Newtonian fluids, yeah.
And
And until so it kind of started me down that path. I come from a family of PhDs, so I always knew I was also going to go to graduate school, but I'm indecisive and didn't necessarily know which particular field of materials engineering I wanted. So in high school, I started doing research at a polymers lab. In undergrad, I did polymer degradations. And then for graduate school, there weren't a lot of polymer opportunities. And I got offered an opportunity for metals additives, so I became a metallurgist somehow. I never.
It's not that far of a reach, though, really.
It's not,
No.
and my educational background really helped solidify a lot of the ideas in metallurgy.
Pun
so-
intended.
Yes. Always intend your puns. But as I was just going down this path, then we got that COVID.
Yeah.
Everything started shutting down, and I was looking for jobs. A lot of job opportunities disappeared. So I called up an old friend who knew a lot of metallurgists and knew a lot of people at EWI, and got me in contact with the right people. I started talking, and they haven't let me leave since. So
was EWI kind of like the first post PhD job you got?
it is the first job.
Yeah.
It's my first grown-up opportunity after academia. So
Yeah.
I've been here since I've graduated.
And when you came into a place like EWI, where there's a wealth of knowledge and
Yes.
some experience, did you have an immediate impact both ways? I'm talking you in the company and then the company on you.
Oh, absolutely. So I got hired as someone who didn't necessarily have a job posting to apply to.
Mhm.
I interviewed for an unknown position. I was informed that it would be something to do with materials and additive. And I'm like, okay, that was my PhD. Sounds like a great fit.
Mhm.
Came in day one. My office got put in the resistant solid state welding group. So I started getting suspicious. That was a really good time. It was, and after a few months, I got actually transferred from materials into the resistance group. And 6 months after that, I was being called a resistance engineer and starting a lab. Now I have a small lab at EWI. And if you know anything about a building, our space is at a premium. So
Mhm.
they have really started valuing some of the work that I've been doing, enough so to give me lab space.
Yeah.
So they have definitely at least seen some of my work come to fruition. And on me personally, I feel like I've grown as a scientist so quickly in these 2.5 years, way more so than I ever had in graduate school, even before then.
So when you get kind of slid into this other grouping, like, hey, we want you to, work in A, but you're actually going to be over in B for a while. And so you're sitting there in the B section in the resistance welding. Now, are you still looked upon for your experience and knowledge from a materials engineer within the resistance scope?
Yes.
So you're not so much worried about power supplies or like, I mean, you're going to be involved with all of it
Sure.
at some point, but
Yeah.
your speciality within the team is still going to be what you
Absolutely.
studied.
Yes, it is all about materials. It's all about metals. All my work comes back to the fundamentals of materials engineering, and that is why I'm having so much fun. And it wasn't as big of a shock to transition to welding, which I never thought I would end up in. So
Yeah, that's something that I hear a lot in the engineering sphere for the people that I know in the welding world. They were like, I started off being an engineer to do X, and then you get bit by the metallurgy bug or the steel bug, and it draws you in. And I find that it's quite eye-opening. Did you find that same experience when you're like kind of slid into EWI and was like, this is the breadth of stuff that's happening in this field?
So in school, when they would talk about metallurgy, it was always, oh, well, we've solved X, Y, and Z in metallurgy. We know everything. And then I show up at EWI and they're like, well, there's 1,000 problems of knowing everything. So it kind of became okay, well, we know the fundamentals. Great, fantastic. But what can we build on that? And it became such a challenge and so much fun to solve these different problems. So it definitely bit me a little.
I heard someone said to me once, they said, when you enter metallurgy as an engineer, it's like learning to cook where every ingredient counts.
Yeah.
Where it's not like, in plastics, you can't just add something. It won't work at all. Like it won't even mix at all.
Yep.
But you get into metals and like most things can mix in some way or another.
Sure.
And even if it's not a good, like homogeneous mix, it might still improve the dynamics of the metal. Like you don't know until you try.
Yeah.
Right. And it's huge, right?
I feel like metallurgy is somewhere between cooking and baking. So you
love that.
you can kind of change A, B, and C, but if you change Z, it's going to fall down. Like, you don't want to do that.
Yeah, unless you want a flat cake.
Oh, maybe.
I mean, they still taste good sometimes.
Yeah,
As a person who
absolutely.
makes many flat cakes, just put lots of icing on them.
But you don't want a flat souffle.
No, that's a
So-
soufflop.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all about getting that right ratio, but that timing, the heating. So it goes back to that fundamental physics. You can't mess the physics up.
Right.
Chemistry you can play with a little.
Now, this is a totally left field question because it just popped into my head. All right. So I just read that they found some sphericals. What are they called? In the bottom of the ocean when metals get incredible pressure and temperature and they turn into a spheroid, I believe is what they called.
Yeah.
And they found some in the bottom of the ocean and they're saying that there are no known metallic elements within this spheroid. Like they don't exist within our periodic table and they're at some lab right now. I find that I don't believe that. I feel like I can't believe that because, and this is an argument I had with somebody because I was like, okay, so we have our universe and we have our periodic table and we've added things to it, but we created those things sort of like based on half-life and blah, blah, blah. Okay. But at the end of the day, we have an understanding that even when we find new things, they're just going to be a mixed version of what we have, right? Now, if this is something that is not on our periodic table, that A means we did it wrong in the first place, or B, it's from like another dimension that doesn't follow our rules of physics. Your thoughts on this?
So I have found physics holds true so far, so good. There's some question about like string theory and like quantum and such. We don't understand it all. However, the atom
is the atom.
And we're pretty confident that we've gotten mostly that worked out. I find a lot of journalism tends to overblow science. It's like, oh, they don't know what it is. They probably don't have the results back of whatever
they're waiting
test.
from the lab.
The lab's working on it. Maybe it's polishing funny. Maybe it's corroded funny. But eventually we'll figure it out. It's a matter of time. I don't really believe that we have some alien new atom that we haven't found. We've been pretty good at filling out this periodic table. And there's only so many like protons you can add before.
It's just destabilized.
Exactly. So I am not convinced. Maybe it's a new alloy because there's
absolutely
so many possibilities that we haven't even addressed.
And it might have been under temperatures and pressures we don't even understand. Sure. I guess, see, I'm on the same boat. Yeah, good.
But
so if EWI is hiring, we just had the same thought. All right. So
hey, there's a data science position currently open. So we are looking for applications.
So, okay. Now back to the original conversation, because I just had to get that off my chest and you were the right person to ask. So, as a fresh grad getting hired at EWI, how do you feel your career is comparing to your fellow graduates that finished, right out of school with PhDs and X engineering? Do you feel like you have had more opportunities, less, or is everyone you went to college with just kicking butt right now?
Oh, they're absolutely just kicking it. It's amazing. None of them have turned to become yoga teachers at all. Well, this has always been my passion, and I feel like opportunity goes for those who go searching for it. So I've always wanted to work in a very dynamic, very lively environment. So I feel very confident and very secure with being a recent grad and getting into this world. I know that a lot of my fellow graduates have also gotten amazing jobs all over the country and all over the world. So I'm very proud of them as well. I don't know if I can really compare different paths because some of them became professors and that was never a track for me. Those that went into industries, some of them went into such complete different fields that how do you compare? I've published, I've presented, I've met a billion new people. And I feel very confident and strong about where my career is going, but I don't want to compare it to anyone else.
Well, and that brings up an interesting question, like in terms of where your career is going, like you're young, you are, in this field, you have 40 years of work ahead of you, right? If you want, and do you see yourself staying within this forever? Do you still have inklings of the polymer world? Do you still have thoughts of, seeing what else is out there?
As of right now, I am very happy where I am in EWI.
And this is not going to be on your job review, so
for EWI, I am very content in my current working conditions. No, in seriousness, I really do enjoy my job a lot, and when you say getting into polymers, for me, that's walking down a few rows of cubes and talking to the polymers guys. There was a project that I was getting involved in. There's a big data science project that I will be involved in a few months. There's all sorts of different opportunities. I work with the lasers group a lot. So I can see myself staying in a place like this quite a long time, and staying in consulting in general, because it's so fun to interact with our clients and to understand their problems and understand the real industry need and work to solve those problems and have an impact. You don't get that opportunity in a lot of places.
No, you don't. So walk us through the path of a client that ends up on your desk in terms of the work.
Sure.
How does that work? And how, if someone's listening and saying, "Hey, I have an engineering problem coming up at my company. Perhaps I'll reach out to EWI." What does that pathway look like?
So, entering into our pipeline can come from anywhere. I actually just received an email 2 days ago about someone that heard about a technique I'm using from a presentation I think we did months and months back. So they reached out to me in email. They happened to get the right person. If they didn't, they would get transferred into a sales team, and the salespeople will
figure it out,
get it into the right engineer's hands. We'll usually set up a call. We'll talk about the needs. They'll talk about timelines and all the good stuff of what does the customer really want to see, how much they want to spend, and what's the depth of the problem realistically. Is this a quick, let me go to the plant, turn a few knobs and get it solved? Or is this a multi-year project that we're going to have to get into the weeds and really
bring in teams and specialists? Yeah.
So we'll kind of establish all of that in a call. Then we'll go to a proposal stage where we will write out every technical detail of how we plan to address the problem. Send that to them. If they like what we have, they'll just fund it and it's a great day. If they don't, we'll do some back and forth and some discussions. See if there's a negotiation there. Exactly. The terms, the timeline, everything's up for discussion. And then once we all agree, we'll get the project kicked off and we will go at it running. I've had projects last as little as a day, and I've had a couple that we've just kept going and going. And one project for me has been going on for about 2 years now.
Wow.
And
the clients know this is going to take time, right?
Absolutely.
It's not like they're sitting there being like, hello.
Yeah. So they know it takes time. It's a constant communication. I have a conference with them every 2 weeks, and we discuss what next steps are, where we are now. That we present together. In October, I have a presentation with this company actually to the broader audience. So it's the scientific process, but I feel like it's the scientific process a bit accelerated than you would see in like a traditional lab. It's a lot more communication. It's a lot more talking to a client. It's a lot more talking to society at large about the new technique. Yeah. Because science is only as good as it's going to get used.
Yeah, yeah. So. And I think that accelerated pace also comes from expectations. Yeah. Right. It comes from expectations where, last year I got to visit some of the great National Research Council labs in Canada, and, they're obviously amazing work. This is like huge projects. But I feel like there's not as much a sense of urgency as there is perhaps a sense of, perfection. Yeah. And I'm not saying that you give up perfection for urgency, but sometimes when you have a client, you do feel like a responsibility to return something to them because they have a business that's relying on your findings, correct?
Yes. I actually get chastited often for getting emotionally involved in my projects because I do love the science behind them, and I really do want to see them succeed. I want my clients to be happy. And most of the time we are solving something that is a real problem for them. So if we don't solve it, who's going to?
Yeah.
So it does put a pressure on us, but it also, I want my clients to, end of the day, be very satisfied in the quality that we're giving them. And perfection doesn't exist.
No.
You can chase after it all you want, but
at some point you have to draw the line.
You have to draw the line somewhere. And in manufacturing, something that works often is what actually ends up being implemented.
Yeah. And that's something I learned in the manufacturing industry for years is small steps get you to the end game faster. If you try to make that big jump and work towards a big jump, you'll spend more time planning that by the time you try to activate, the plan is already dead. Like too many variables have changed in all that time that you're better off taking the little wins and stacking them to get to where you need to go.
One of the industries my team works closely with is the automotive industry. And the changes that are happening with e-vehicles coming, and there's such a shift right now of materials being used. Aluminums are coming in. Everybody knows steel and aluminums do not like welding to each other. Well, now they can be welded to each other. So we have methods. But aluminums are coming in. We're having a lot of copper come in. There's copper shortages we have to worry about. So things are changing so very quickly. And on Gen 3 steels and new techniques for Gen 3 steels, those are just starting to get implemented into the newest vehicles. How do you keep up?
Yeah. While you're working, things are happening somewhere else right now.
Yeah.
So.
And that's actually what my presentation is going to be at Fabtech, is a method to decrease timing, the investment of time, but still get really good data very quickly. So you can at least try to keep up with the new advances.
Yeah, you need those kind of like defined checkpoints to return information, or else the other people that may need it are going to sit, right?
Exactly. So you can start making decisions without having to go through the traditional test everything 5 times, go back, check. So this is a much faster process, and it uses really basic statistics and science. So it's not something that's necessarily, we're not shortcutting anything. We're just drawing the connections using math.
Yeah. And it's not going to be wrong. Like it shouldn't be.
No, it'll get you not even in the right ballpark. It'll get you in the right, base, even if with the baseball analogies, it'll get you very close to the true answer with a very small margin of error, and then you can go back and test if those seem to be in the right parameter fields that you were looking for in the first place. If it's completely out in left field,
you'll know right away. Yeah Now, as a materials engineer, you brought up something, the shortages of copper, which is something, generally in terms of the world. We've industrialized the planet now for a few centuries. There are going to be naturally shortages of certain materials that we're going to start encountering. And purity issues of materials. I know that even with just iron ore, we are starting to have issues of the recycled content of iron ores because there's just, you can only mine a planet for so long before things start to suffer. Now, how much does that kind of come into, like, do you have to think about that often when designing, being like, we're working on this project, we have these list of materials that we want to make this project work, but in the back of your mind, you're thinking that one material is probably not even going to be here in 10 years or 50 years, or like, are these things you have to just think about and work around?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the most important things that socially and society that an engineer is tasked with is longevity of a product. E-vehicles, for instance, lithium, we're getting shortages already. We're having problems with mining.
It wasn't a common element to start with.
No, it was not. And now we want all of it. So we're seeing problems with that. Clean copper. Copper is incredibly conductive and likes dissolving a lot of materials. So getting clean copper for wires is becoming harder and harder. Recycling, I love recycling. I think, especially for aluminum, it's one of the best things you can do. However, most people don't realize how many things have more than one material in them.
Yeah.
So if you throw a bicycle, which you think is an aluminum frame, it might have steel in it.
Likely bearings are not going to be
Yeah,
aluminum. Any of the bearings are
exactly.
100% going to be steel. Like,
So if your recycling process isn't up to standard, you're going to get contamination.
yeah.
And that's really problematic when you start looking into grades of materials
Right.
and everything. It's one of the biggest tasks that we always have is, are the materials that we start with what we asked for?
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer is no.
Yeah. And what are some of the materials that you would say are going to be most problematic going forward?
Well, helium is always going to be a problem.
Yeah, we just opened up a new helium mine in my province in Saskatchewan in Canada. And it's one of like 3 on the planet. And I was like, what? And it's like completely non-renewable. Like it's gone.
Yep. And that's
Yeah.
going to be problematic.
Mhm.
Copper is going to start playing a role. Aluminum, I feel like we're going to have a lot more play
Products,
with
yeah.
lightweighting coming in, with aluminum can be manipulated in different ways, metal matrix composites, for instance,
Mhm.
to even possibly replace copper in some components. So there's definitely
the ductility is just, I mean, you can work it, but it's
there's a lot at
Yeah.
play, but I believe aluminum's going to be interesting in the next few years of what happens to it in different grades and such.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, steel is still going to be used.
king. Yeah.
Yeah, steel is king, period.
It's the easiest to, well, first of all, we have the infrastructure.
Yes.
Right. So first of all, we have infrastructure. Second of all, we have quantity. Even if grades are lowering, it recycles well and easily.
Sure.
Even if you get some contaminants in it, it's quite easy to burn them out or separate them back out.
Yes, you can liquidize. And we have the infrastructure for it, but it's also, it's not just the amount that exists, it's also the political environments that the mines exist in. In Canada and America, the cost of labor is so sky high that even though there are pockets in mining areas, it's very difficult to actually mine in a lot of these countries. So you end up mining from countries that have political unrest. You have destabilized governments, problems with shipping lanes, and it, depending on the material, can be an extremely dirty job and very unsafe. So we really need to watch where we source the materials from. Can we get them out of recycling? Electronics are starting to take so much of our materials.
And some type of sustainable, socially responsible way.
Exactly.
Because, you know, you see these stories about people recycling mountains of electronics in, you know, some country. And it's like, some of those are radioactive. Some of them are toxic. And it's like, that's not the best way to do that.
No, but there's also, there's cleaner ways of doing it, because the more electrified our society gets, we need those materials back.
Yeah.
The amount of gold, silver, platinum inside of a phone, it's insane.
Yeah. I did. I worked in Ghana in West Africa a couple times at a gold mine, helping a Canadian company in Ghana try to come up with a better, like, I guess, workforce development system. Safety was a big thing. And, you know, people often hear about blood diamonds.
Yes.
And that there was a kind of a world, you know, movement to say, you know, we're not going to purchase diamonds if they're not from a socially responsible, you know, area, because there's such a high end material that these companies are making billions and not putting anything back into the into the responsible, you know, acquisition of these materials. The same thing's happening with gold now, right? Because these gold mines in Africa and around the world are dreadfully dangerous, and the way they even process and work, it's, you know, it was mind-blowing for me as a Canadian, and I worked in the mining industry for many years, potash, uranium mines, which I thought at that time were like, whoa, these places are big and scary, you know. And then I go work at a mine in Ghana and I go through, whoa, you know, perhaps I was a little off in my judgment, but that movement is starting to happen, you know, where these companies are saying, you know, no one's buying our gold. Because we're getting kind of blacklisted because we're such a bad track record, right? And I see that as a good change, but I also see it as possibly, and I hope I'm wrong, but the end user is going to be the one that ends up paying for all that.
Yeah.
It's never going to be the companies that are raking in the
No.
billions. It's going to be the price of gold is going to triple now because we got to be safe.
Yep.
And I don't like that setup. What do you think about the whole like social responsibility of materials and acquisitions and stuff like that?
I think it's definitely something we have to be aware of.
Yeah.
It's something that more people I wish were aware of, because resources are finite. I'm all for let's go try to mine a meteor. That would be cool.
Yeah, I'm
but
down
we're
with
not,
that too.
We are not there yet.
The moon.
Sure.
They just found some cool stuff on there. Thank you, India. Cool rover.
We can find cool stuff in our universe, but okay, so maybe that'll move us a couple thousand years. Great.
Then what? Yeah.
We can't go light years away. This isn't Star Trek. No
yet.
matter how much I want it to be.
Gravity pulse is coming. We're just starting to figure it out.
Right up there
Yeah.
with transparent aluminum.
That's been around forever, apparently.
You can't call ceramic a metal. Yes, you can get aluminum oxide to be transparent. You can't get aluminum. That is a definition of metals that we learn day one in materials. But no, if we don't focus now on how our choices and our sources of materials affect the greater global economy, we're just going to make problems worse.
Yeah. And there are problems that we see already. I mean, in the West, where we are, we have a bubble around us that very much protects us from what's kind of been happening around the world for a while. But it's coming in. I'm an immigrant to this country, to the Americas, and problems that were happening in my home country 20 years ago would have never happened here. They're starting to happen here.
Yeah.
You're starting to see those things, and it's like the globalization goes both ways. We can globalize out, but we're going to get globalized in as well. And that's something that we need to learn to be conscious of, because the easy thing that we used to do is going to affect us more directly now.
Yep.
Right.
Just polymers. Think back in the 80s, everything was made out of plastic. Everything. Because it was the cool, shiny new material. But now we're learning about forever chemicals and how certain polymers can affect our endocrine systems. Teflon. They're finding all sorts of problems. And polymers have their place and have their use. But the transition now, we're going back to aluminum based, we're going back to glass. Glass is a fantastic material.
And so recyclable, easy,
exactly.
cheap. Yeah.
But no one wants to do that. Nobody wants the plastic container instead of the glass one. Yes, the glass one can break.
Not really. Those new ones are like, rank. Like I've dropped them on the tile in my kitchen, been like, oh no, and it bounced. I was like, wow, look at that.
So there's ways of making things work. But we need to be socially conscious that the polymers don't break down like we think they do.
Yeah.
And throwing something out does not end its life. It just moves it to a different location. And if we keep doing that, we're going to run out of space, we're going to run out of initial materials, and we need to think of everything that we source, everything we use, that it has a starting point and it has an end of life. It's engineering for the entire, not only global economy, but lifetime economy as well.
Well, and there's a whole engineering field of how to deal with the after products, right? There's a whole team of really intelligent people being like, well, what do we do with this waste, right?
Exactly. But if you don't think about what happens to the waste when you first build it,
you're not helping.
You're not helping.
Yeah. All right. So that was a great tangent. I loved it. But I had a question there. I had a question from earlier on. I still got a few. But you said you decided you wanted to be a materials engineer in the 7th grade. That's a bold statement. So
I know.
I wanted to be a robotics engineer in the 7th grade. Actually, 5th grade is when I decided that I wanted to be a robotics engineer. I ended up not doing it. I ended up being a welder, and it's still fantastic. I loved it. But, and I get to work with robots today. So I feel like it came full circle.
Sure.
But why materials engineering? You said silly putty. As a young woman or a young girl, in the 7th grade, we feel that there's not enough exposure to STEM and to the sciences for young girls, and we find that as a society we're trying to make a correction in that. So you said your parents were both, doctors, PhDs.
Yes.
Was that part of your pathway of being like, I'm a young girl and I want to get into this engineering field? Or was there something in your life that interested you, or a hobby? What was it?
Well, when I found out I couldn't be a ballerina astronaut, that was not an actual life choice or career for me.
I feel like that's doable.
I grew a foot in a year. The ballet was never going to happen. Astronaut was also unlikely. Developed asthma somewhere around like the 6th grade. You don't see a lot of asthmatic astronauts. So those are kind of
some barriers.
A few barriers to entry. But I feel like I've been in the sciences since I was itty bitty.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother worked in a lab. My grandfather was an engineer. My mom's a PhD chemist. So being in a lab, I think I went to my first health and safety meeting for like labs with my mom when I was like 7 years old. I think so. Great.
Just tagging along.
Oh yeah, just tagging along. So I already had my safety certifications when I was nice and young. But I was just always exposed to it. It was never like a girl thing or guy thing.
Yeah.
It was science solves problems.
Yeah.
And I always liked to solve problems. My mom always joked around that my brother would take apart things, and then it would be up to me to put them back together. So they actually worked.
So what's your brother do now?
He's an accountant.
Oh, so he still takes things apart.
Yeah, just in ledgers. He actually works on cars on the weekends. But no, he became an accountant. We call him the black sheep because he didn't go into the sciences. But he kind of got me down the track that things can be broken down in small parts, and then we can actually put them together in cool ways. And then watching my mom do these really cool chemistry things that I didn't understand, and this fancy equipment that just looked so cool and fun to play with. It was the biggest playground I could think of. And I never wanted to leave the sandbox, and this was just a bigger sandbox.
Yeah, the universe is a pretty big sandbox.
Exactly. So if you're telling me there's a job where I can go play with things every day and see how they work and put them together, break them down, look at them under these really fancy microscopes, it was just like hand to a glove. It was exactly what I was supposed to do. So I kind of knew I was going to go into the sciences pretty early on. I explored medical. I realized I didn't want to deal with that many humans in a day.
Yeah,
so
that my mom, I don't know, it's an immigrant thing. Like, we all have to be doctors. And and my mom was always like, you got to be a doctor. And I just always found that I had zero desire to like touch people.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if it's first aid, like as a first aid, like first responder, like you get hurt, I'm there for you. But for a job, no,
bother not. So medicine was out. Also, medical school in the U.S. It's crazy. A lot. Yeah. Also, from an immigrant family, it was like, well, you're going to college, but you're going to figure out how to pay for it.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
It's called student loan.
Yeah. But so in the 7th grade, we had some like exposure to the different styles of engineering and such. And they're more of the traditional, you can be a mechanical, and mechanical guys work on like robots and mechanical things. I went,
Civil does bridges.
Exactly. Civil does bridges, biomedical, you're back to touching humans and then animals too. And I'm like, that was a lot for me. And we kind of like went around, and every single time I noticed them asking, well, what is this made out of? Why does this look like this? What properties, like, why did you pick it to be this? And a lot of people couldn't answer me that. So I felt like that was a question like series that I just started going down. And every time I would ask, well, what is the light bulb made out of? You could see the grains like in some of these metals just with your naked eye. And I thought it was so cool. And I wanted to know more. And I found out there's an entire like dedicated field on this. And I'm like, well, I already asked the question, so why don't I just jump right in?
And did you have any challenges, either, intellectually or personally through your college experience? Was there anything that you found was like you struggled with or situations, because I mean, I went to university for 6 years, and some of it sucked.
Oh yeah.
Right. Some of it, I would say lots of it was awesome. I loved my education, but there was definitely points where I was like, why am I doing this? You know?
So I actually, I struggle with a number of things. I'm actually dyslexic, which I didn't get diagnosed until college, actually, because I'm from an immigrant family. They just thought I didn't speak English.
Yeah. And you will, like, I mean, the brain is an amazing thing. It'll find workarounds.
Oh,
right?
yeah. There's absolutely ways to find things to fix it. Spell check is awesome. I'm just saying. And so it's not a limitation of mine. It was a challenge, but it didn't limit me.
Yeah.
There was some medical issues I had in college. Actually, I had to drop out for a semester.
No.
So that was incredibly challenging. It was also it pushed back my graduation schedule. I was supposed to graduate even early. So that was definitely a struggle, both like
setback,
physically and mentally, that I had to deal with. And just in general, education, while it was valued in my family highly, I ended up going to a very expensive school. I went to Case Western Reserve, and I am thankful for all the scholarships I got, free tuition ride and everything. It was still incredibly challenging. I had a full-time job. I had college. I've tried to do research. Like, there was a lot of things going on.
And you're trying to still like have the life that you see other people in college have.
Exactly.
Right. Which is sometimes very difficult to, they say keeping up with the Joneses, and that's tough.
I was a sorority girl. I was the president of the Ballroom Society. Like,
so you were busy.
Yeah. Sleep was the low on the priority list.
Yeah. And how did you feel? Like, did you feel like you were burning out? What did you do to center yourself and get through all that?
So ballroom dancing was actually my biggest outlet. It was both a creative outlet and physical exercise. Yeah. So it really helped me just find like that little happy place and relax a little. Because nothing says relaxing like competitive dancing for 8 hours straight.
But dancing is amazing, though. Dancing is good for the soul. Because there's music, and I mean,
it's happy. It's a great environment. So that was always something I went back to. We would go out on Friday nights. There was a local salsa club, so all the ballroom dancers would go there. It was. I found
all the people that don't know how to dance feel bad.
Oh, actually, that club was mostly full of competitive ballroom dancers. It was usually the other way around.
Yeah, scoping out the talent.
Making sure the competition wasn't too hard. But it was definitely joining small groups of people. I'm still involved with some of the sorority aspects as well. I have a very close group of women friends that are highly successful individuals, but they're there to support me and help me through a lot of these challenges, because I do work in a highly male-dominated field.
It is. Did you have any mentors through college? You talk about your sorority, the sisterhood that you developed there, that you still have. Yes. How important was that aspect of mentorship in your success? And, do you see yourself as a mentor now to others?
I hope so. So I had quite a few people to look up to at Case, especially in my early college career. There was so many great professors. I can't even give you the entire department, honestly. Love all you guys if you're listening.
I'm sure they will.
But there was every aspect. There were powerful women who were leading groups, had like PIs on these amazing projects. There were immigrant professors who had very similar journeys. They struggled to make their way in the world, and they found their place and following their passion. There's these industry leaders that have written the book, the literal like reference book on some of these topics that just have like 30, 40, 50 years of knowledge behind them. And they're just so inspirational. And there's professors that were so cutting edge that were pushing us to learn how to do things way outside of materials. I learned to program at Case. I thank them every single day now.
Yeah.
And it's having that nice mix of just personalities. I couldn't even pick a single mentor. I will shout out to Suneva Collins. She wasn't directly in my department, but she worked very closely with ASM International. And she actually pulled a lot of the females from my group. There was like 3 of us, but still, she pulled us into ASM and got us involved. And that really started pushing me down the path of this materials engineering world, because I ended up sitting on the board of directors as a student.
Awesome.
I ended up being very close friends with a lot of really great individuals, and those contacts I still keep in touch with.
Yeah.
I look forward to conferences every year when I see them.
Yeah, that networking and the mentorship that happens, I find that I mean, it's one of the reasons I do the podcast, is usually the real game changer in someone's life professionally. I know a lot of very intelligent people that don't invest into the networking and the mentorship side of their profession, and I find that it limits them, and that's a choice. That's a choice.
It is a choice.
Because I mean, and that's fine. That's a fine choice. But if you want to get out there and do like the really interesting things, or find out what's on the cutting edge, or get into like following the niche things that are hard to pin down, you got to get out there. There's no way to do it. Like,
you can't know everything, but you can know everybody.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important to make friends, to listen to industry leaders, to introduce yourself to industry leaders, because they were once in your shoes as well. Yeah. And I really hope I can be that mentor for someone. I've had a number of interns. I've had a number of undergrads that I've discussed whether or not they wanted to go to graduate school, whether or not they want to go into industry, what are the different paths and choices, because I'm lucky. I came from a family that did go through a PhD program, but there's very few. Most don't. No. Most learn the lesson after one generation. We can't seem to. But there's this disconnect, and not enough people talk about it, especially a lot of young professionals can really start putting their nose down, like nose to the grindstone type of thing, and they never look up and go, well, there's an 18-year-old that's trying to decide their life. Maybe I could be the voice that helps them make decisions.
That one person that steps up, that's usually all you need. Yeah.
And just learning about all the different generational changes. Also, people forget that 40 years ago, there wouldn't be someone like me sitting at EWI. That was unheard of.
Yeah.
And now I work in a group where we have 2 female engineers. In my group alone, we have so many talented individuals. I think we did the math once. At EWI, every woman engineer except one has a PhD.
Wow.
And it's just incredible. And they all went different paths.
And no shade to the one.
And no shade to the one. That one not only is an engineer, but she's a program manager as well. Yeah. So she has her hands full. She's good. Absolutely. It's inspiring that they all follow different paths. I went straight through school because I knew if I left into industry, I would never come back. Yeah. Some of them went back to get their PhDs after having kids, after moving states, after doing this or that. It's all incredible. And there's just being around these awesome, determined women. And I see myself following someone's path. I don't know whose yet, but someone's. And I hope that I could be that stepping stone for some younger children. Yeah. Because I do want to see more women in the engineering fields. But I'm finding that it isn't a lack of exposure to science and math that's really problematic. It's allowing the women in each transition step, so like the transition from primary school to middle school, the transition from middle school to high school, transition to college, those are where we start losing people.
Yeah, there's an attrition there.
Yeah, and every single one of those steps, and that's really, really sad to see, especially we're having more women graduate from college these days than men.
Yeah.
But why am
Is there less women leaders? And PhDs and this is something I argue all the time. You know, I'm a son,
Mhm.
and I have a sister, and I have a daughter, and was raised very, you know, anti-patriarchy.
Mhm.
I've had many podcasts about this, and I don't like the patriarchy because the patriarchy is just a symbol of unjustness, of you
Mhm.
know, and that relates to racism and to all these other things, right? So, you know, when I look at what we do, even at CWB as a company to help women get into the pipeline,
Yeah.
you know, the top of the funnel in terms of what is welding, getting into welding, high school, and then, like you said, it starts to peter out once you get to
Mhm.
college, and then you kind of lose track of where they go, and you find out these terrible statistics that we only have 5% of women in the welding fields, which is abysmal.
It is.
And you think, like, how did we go from having, you know, high schools, like we do camps, and it's like 50-50,
Yeah.
sometimes more women than boys, but 10 years later, none.
And
right? So what happened?
half of that is they don't have a mentor to
That's right.
talk to ask is this a problem? Is this something that I even should address?
Mhm.
So there's a certain amount of, okay, we're trying to change the world, but are we doing it the wrong way? And if you don't have someone to ask that to,
Mhm.
you feel like you're on an island.
Yeah.
And without support, you're gonna drift away. There's so many people who've gotten PhDs and that have stepped out of the field, which is fine. And if they're pursuing what makes them happy, do it.
Awesome, yeah.
Absolutely. But I also know you didn't get that PhD just because
You wanted a piece of paper.
you wanted a piece of paper.
Yeah.
It's not worth that.
Yeah.
You had passion for this at some point. If your priorities changed, great, go for it. But if you still want to do this and you feel like you're isolated and you don't have that mentorship, that is one of the sad
That's
parts.
sad.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're almost out of time.
Oh,
I see
no.
Daniela giving me the wink over there. Yeah. It's a tight schedule this week, I'm sure, for all of us.
Totally understand.
So I got a couple questions still
Sure.
that I thought were really interesting. First of all, let's just do the simple one. What's your presentation on? What are you doing? You said you touched on it a little bit.
Okay, so we're going to do mathematical mapping using materials properties, and it's basically taking traditional design of experiments and adding a layer so that you can predict properties for an entire database of materials using very few. I think we did the math, it was over 90% reduction in testing. So you're going from 24 tests to something like 10,000 results.
Wow.
So.
Wow. And I'm sure there's a very specific procedure that you can.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Come check out my talk. I'll go into all the mathematical
Yeah.
depths of that.
And when is it this week?
It is Wednesday, bright and early, I think at 8:30, 8:20, 8:30.
All right. Awesome. I
Yeah.
think. I don't know if we'll be able to come, but I hope. I don't know. I present Tuesday and Wednesday, so I got to figure out my schedule. Yeah, it's nuts. But and this will be released after this is all
Sure.
done. But Fabtech does keep track all the presentations. So if anyone's interested, you can get the presentations if you've uploaded it to the Harvester program, which I don't know. I haven't done mine yet, but hopefully I don't get in trouble.
We'll talk later.
Yeah. But okay, that's awesome. That's gonna be fun. Next question, really quick about mentorship.
Sure.
We did a little bit of research, and it doesn't look like you're a CWB Association member at this moment. So
Honestly, I didn't even know that was a thing. Well, I just got into AWS. So, what is the association?
So the association is what we do and what I'm the boss of, and it's our, we have a membership across around the world of welders and engineers that get together, and we network and we share. We hold conferences. We do all sorts of crazy stuff, and we would love you to have a member. It's free. It's a free membership. So I hope you sign up, and I hope everybody out there signs up for a CWB Association membership, because it's free and it's a wealth of knowledge and resources available to anybody.
Well, I'm going to sign up. Everybody else should too.
Okay, everyone at EWI should. I'm watching you guys. All right.
Hey, I think we need to have an email chain or something, because if I didn't know about it, I know there's others at EWI that would like to know about this.
Awesome. And then the last question, this is to wrap it up. And, as you move forward and look at the rest of your career, during your downtime, you mentioned that you like to game,
Yes.
right? And I'm a big gamer. I got a Link tattoo right there. I have a Switch in my room right now, just if I have any downtime. But right now, what are you playing, and what do you recommend someone to go out there and buy if they're into gaming?
So I've been recently obsessed with RimWorld. I do love me some managing. So managing an entire world and colony is a perfect little escape for me.
Yeah.
I've also recently got into Zoo World.
Oh.
So it's a more expansive, if anyone remembers
Like a sim?
A little bit, yeah. It's if you remember Zoo Tycoon back from 90s, early 2000s, this is a 10 times more expansive version of that. And
again, another management game.
Another management game, yeah. I tend to be highly under management. And I still play Pokemon Go as
well, there should be a lot around here.
Yeah, there is. But it's a nice little quick escape, and it's a fun way to do exercise because I honestly really hate walking on a treadmill.
That's awesome because I love management games too. And it's funny, my wife will be like, you sit and manage all day.
Yes.
And then you come home and can't wait to play your game where you're managing.
Yeah, but they listen to you in the game.
Yeah, they don't fight back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
and if there's attrition, meh.
It's fine. It happens.
Awesome, Olga. Well, any shout outs, anything you'd like to say to anybody? This is your space if you want to say anything.
I just want to thank CWB for giving me this opportunity. Always want to say hi to my EWI friends, and I really would love to shout out both Case Western and Texas A&M University as my alma maters. So thank you for giving me a great education and letting me be here today.
Awesome. Well, Olga, thank you very much for coming on the show, and I really appreciate it. All right. And for all the people that have been following along, thank you very much. We're going to be doing a whole bunch of podcasts this week. By the last one, you'll know, because my voice will probably be gone, as you know from all these shows. But stay tuned for all the next ones, and I'll catch you at the next one, and have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed the show.